So Scientology is actually one of the biggest scams that's currently out there, in my opinion. It is a Ponzi scheme that is masquerading as a religion. It's ruined a lot of lives. So I actually wanted to get to the bottom of this. I actually talked to an ex-member, Aaron Smith-Levin. He was actually on the show Scientology in the Aftermath. The whole episode pretty much was dedicated to him. He is actually a co-founder of the Aftermath Foundation, which is designed to help people get out of Scientology. So I did a 1-hour interview with him. The whole thing is there. We talked about everything related to Scientology, talked about some of the biggest members that are actually big YouTubers as well, Grant Cardone, Dr. Eric Berg, and I even asked him about Meet Kevin, because Meet Kevin spent a lot of time in Florida, actually Clearwater, Florida, where that's actually the mecca for Scientology. So I actually asked him, does he think that Meet Kevin is a Scientologist? I'm not going to ruin it. You have to watch the video and see what he actually said. So the full interview, leave your comment below what you think about Scientology. I'd love to know your opinion as well. For everyone watching, this is Aaron. I'm here with him. He's a former Scientologist. So he has a channel, Growing Up In Scientology, currently at about 90K subs. So I thought I'd have him on and just ask him some questions about Scientology. My personal opinion is that Scientology is a scam, but I'd love to hear his opinion and ask him several questions on it. So first off, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your history in Scientology?
Sure. I generally say I was born and raised in it. I was like 4 years old when my mom got introduced to Scientology. And so it was me and my twin brother being raised by our single mom at that time. And so when she got in, she got in real quick. A quick little primer here, I guess. There's 3 basic levels of involvement in Scientology. You're either public, or you're a staff member, or you're a Sea Org member. So a public pays to do Scientology courses and get Scientology auditing. A staff member works for Scientology, but it's like their day job, and otherwise they live in the real world. And then a Sea Org member are the guys you hear about. They sign the billion-year contracts, and they work 24/7, 365 for Scientology. They don't have lives outside of that. They can't date or marry outside of that.
Okay, but but they're all considered they're all considered Scientologists, right?
They're all considered Scientologists. Just, you could say, different levels of dedication. That's the rough hierarchy: is public, staff, and then Sea Org.
So do like Sea Org and public, do they look down on the other groups or no?
The Sea Org looks down on the staff and the public, and the Sea Org and the staff both look down on the public.
Okay. All right.
For essentially not, doing more or being as dedicated. Or there's another way of thinking about it, which is the public are the people who have the frame of mind of like, I'm struggling, there's something wrong with me, I'd like to improve myself, can you please help me be better? Mm-hmm. And the staff and the Sea Org are more of like, yeah, we're in the same boat, but we're not really being whiny little bitches about it. We're the ones helping you guys. We're the ones putting our baggage on the back seat and rising above it, but we will help you guys since you guys can't do that.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so I'm explaining all that because when my mom joined Scientology, she basically immediately joined staff and went very dedicated. So most of my earliest memories are in the Scientology organization. So I lived a somewhat normal life up until 12 years old. And then at that point, me and my brother and stepbrother and stepsister and a couple other friends of a family friend all joined staff. So essentially at 12 years old, I stopped going to school. I just started working full-time for Scientology. So from the age of 12 to 26, I was a staff member and a Sea Org member. And then at 26, I left the Sea Org, but was still a Scientologist. That was in 2006. And I'm giving a real abbreviated version of the story. So in 2014, I officially left Scientology, both my wife and I. And that story is told in part in the TV show Scientology in the Aftermath in the first season, one of the episodes.
Okay, interesting. So for those who are watching who don't know what Scientology is, could you give a brief rundown of what it is and what they believe? I know that could go on for hours, but
no,
just
I can do like a 30-second version.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll explain it the way a Scientologist should probably explain it, like just in good faith. So Scientology, aside from all the abusive and con artist, like Scientology, I agree with you, is a scam and a con. Okay, but aside from that, and aside from the abusive behavior, I think you could call it a spiritual philosophy. A Scientologist would certainly call it a spiritual or a religious philosophy. So their genuinely held beliefs are that we are immortal spiritual beings who've been around for about roughly 76 trillion years. We cannot die. We will not die ever. That we simply don't remember our previous lives, because after every time our body dies, our little spiritual memories get wiped. That's a side story I won't get into right now. But that we are essentially living a matrix-like existence here on Earth. Lifetime after lifetime, we're spiritual beings, but we're trapped in these bodies. And these bodies are actually a prison. And Earth is actually a prison planet. And we are being kept here specifically because it is a prison. And that only through Scientology auditing, which is like one-on-one counseling, can you remove the spiritual handcuffs, remove the barriers that are keeping you trapped in these bodies, and that is keeping you from remembering all your past lives. So they do genuinely believe that with enough Scientology auditing, your spiritual awareness and ability gets raised up to a point that you skip the little between lifetime area where your memory gets wiped. You skip that so that when you pick up your next body, you'll remember all your past lifetimes. And they believe that you will, through this process, essentially regain like godlike spiritual powers, like telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, whatever. They believe that the spiritual universe is separate from and senior to the physical universe. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They do genuinely believe all that. Your average Scientologist doesn't think it's a scam or anything like that.
Okay.
Now, yeah.
Sorry.
Now, everything else Scientology says publicly has almost no. If you ever try to ask a Scientologist or watch a Scientology video, you get to the end of the video and you're like, yeah, but what is Scientology? I still don't understand it.
Yeah.
Because they won't just explain it that way. They're like, it's a bunch of tools to help you do better in life and solve your problems and communicate better and have better relationships and be at cause. It sounds like a Grant Cardone seminar.
Yeah, I've looked into a bunch of con artists and stuff, and it's what they say is intentionally confusing, and it seems like Scientology is that way as well.
For sure.
So you said that Scientologists believe that we're all immortal beings. Do they believe that about people who are not Scientologists, or are we gonna? Yeah, so basically, being in Scientology just allows you access to your memories and superpowers and stuff. Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Yep.
So Scientology was created by L. Ron Hubbard. He was a science fiction writer initially. Do you think that he was a con man, or do you think that he actually believed what he was teaching about Scientology?
Both. I believed that he believed the fundamentals of what he was selling. But I believe he had the personality type where he was incapable of even telling you a true story about something that actually happened without embellishing it to make it sound more incredible. So like if you take the first book that many people have heard of, Dianetics, Dianetics was the first book that he wrote that eventually led to Scientology, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I believe, L. Ron Hubbard believed that Dianetics was like a workable sort of mental therapy. And if you read the book, it lays out a procedure. And if you use the procedure, some people find it helpful. I never particularly did myself. But if you read this book, if you read it like without any spiritual or religious connotation at all, because Dianetics was not spiritual or religious, you're still confronted with all of these ridiculous assertions and representations he makes about Dianetics, which is that once you've used this procedure thoroughly enough, you will have, perfect eidetic recall, like a photographic memory. You'll never get sick again. Your mind will be like a perfect calculator. You'll never need glasses. Dianetics can cure arthritis and cancer. And you're like, Jesus Christ, dude. Like, it's one thing to lay out a process and say, this can be helpful for a bunch of people a bunch of the time. And then it's another thing to like inject almost an aspect of faith into it. Mm-hmm. That you have to take it on his word that not only does it work this way, but it always works 100% of the time on everyone if it's applied correctly. And so it's kind of a long answer to, I actually know that L. Ron Hubbard did believe his own bullshit. Up until the day he died, he was still almost driving himself crazy using the more advanced confidential Scientology procedures, trying to rid himself of these spiritual beings that he believed was stuck to his body, which is what Scientologists learn on the confidential upper levels. There's no question he bought into his own bullshit. There was just a ton of lies mixed into it all as well.
Okay. And you said, you described Dianetics as somewhat of like mental therapy, you said? But yeah. I think that's interesting that like Scientology does not like psychology at all, right? But
that's true, but not back then.
Not back then?
The original Dianetics was actually even like in the beginning when it says like in the beginning of the book, it dedicated to or thanks to or given recognition to other people. He specifically mentioned Sigmund Freud. And when Dianetics was published, he actually pitched it to the APA, the American Psychological Association and the American Psychiatric Association. He thought that his thing was like revolutionary and it was going to revolutionize the field of mental health and psychiatry. And they basically told him to go get fucked. And that's sort of where the war with psychiatry began.
Okay. All right. So what about David Miscavige? He's the current leader of Scientology. Do you think he believes in everything going on, or is he a con artist?
I believe that he believes in the fundamental like architecture of Scientology. I don't think he believes. Well, I know he doesn't believe all of the mythology around L. Ron Hubbard. Like your average Scientologist is led to believe that L. Ron Hubbard was essentially this faultless character who saw everything and planned for everything and did everything perfectly. There's a very specific aspect of Scientology that Miscavige knows is a lie, but it doesn't necessarily contradict his belief in the overall subject of Scientology. So I mentioned earlier the confidential upper levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Scientology, those levels only go up to 8 as of right now. As a public Scientologist, you can only pay for and do up to OT level 8. Well, when Hubbard died, Miscavige is one of the people who announced to all Scientologists that OT 9 and 10, and it was also implied 11 through 15, but we'll just say OT 9 and 10, that Hubbard had finished creating OT 9 and 10 before he died, and that it's just like sitting in a vault waiting to be released once Scientology has reached certain expansion benchmarks. Well, that is a 100% lie. Miscavige knows it's a lie, but even the most senior Scientology executives don't necessarily know that that's a lie. There's like a handful of people who know that that's a lie. So Miscavige is sitting there, and Miscavige has perpetuated this lie for the last 40 years. Like almost every year he tells everyone, all right, next year our goal is to release OT 9 and 10. He says it like every year. But I think Miscavige is sitting there going, just because Hubbard didn't do it doesn't mean he didn't mean to do it, and it doesn't mean it's not there to be done. He probably is sitting there thinking it's his job to figure out how to come up with OT 9 and 10. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there is a very specific lie that he is perpetuating upon Scientologists, but I do believe that he believes in the overall, what I call the architecture of Scientology, the fundamental, the skeleton, the bones.
All right, you don't think he would ever himself write what is it, OTK 8, 9 or whatever?
He may eventually, but there are serious obstacles to overcome in doing that. It's almost like the promise and the buildup and the expectation of OT 9 and 10 is better than the reality of anything he could come up with. Do you know what I mean? Like once he releases something, now everyone has something to be very disappointed about.
Like the last season of Game of Thrones, basically.
And whereas people are disappointed that they've been waiting for 30 years or whatever,
mm-hmm.
that's nothing compared to the disappointment they will experience if he tries to come out with something. There are very real barriers. And yet, what's he going to do? I mean, who knows? Maybe he can hang on long enough. I mean, the guy's like 60-something years old. I don't know. Could he hang on another 30 years? Who knows? It's certainly a huge problem.
All right. So I know in the past, the government has gone after Scientology for tax issues, and I think they took away their religious status at one point, and then they got it back.
You mean just tax exempt status?
Yeah, tax exempt status.
It gets into the little weeds here. Like, technically, the IRS doesn't decide what a religion is. Like, I don't want to. So they had tax exemption back in the 60s. It was taken away. They got it back in 1993, and I do believe it will eventually be taken away again, personally.
Okay, so it seems like there's a lot of incidents with like the Sea Org and a lot of possible shady things going on within Scientology. I'm just curious why you think like the government or the FBI or something just hasn't gone after Scientology and shut it down by this point.
The protection that they enjoy by virtue of getting their tax exempt status back makes it very difficult, or I should say it limits what the FBI can go after them for. Like, the way a religious group treats its members is not subject to government oversight.
Even if there's abuse or something like that?
It depends on what kind of abuse. If it's child abuse or elder abuse, then the government can do something. Almost anything other than that, and you are limited. Now, of course, sexual abuse or whatever, but that just... that would come down to prosecuting the individuals involved, not the organization. You know what I mean? But like, because in so many of the things that you and I or any casual observer would be like, oh my God, that's got to be illegal. The court is in a position of having to interpret Scientology policy and then making like a value judgment on whether it's fair or unfair. And courts are not allowed to interpret religious scripture. And even though any Scientologist would sort of snicker at the idea of calling Scientology policy scripture, when their lawyers get into the courts, that's exactly what they do. All of a sudden, it's ministers and scriptures and confessionals, when Scientologists don't use those words.
Okay.
So the FBI will eventually get Scientology on the credit card fraud and the wire fraud and stuff like that. That just like... it's easier to get the mafia on tax evasion than it is on murder. I think there'll be some RICO things coming into play.
Okay. So you do think they'll get shut down at some point, or?
Well, not shut down. I think they will be prosecuted for various felonies. I think that will open the door to getting their tax exempt status revoked. And then it's just sort of a matter of time of how long can they hold on financially. They have substantial reserves, but if you take their tax exempt status away, now you've removed the incentive for their members to give them massive donations like they do now. And you've put all of their properties back onto the tax rolls. And I'm not sure they have enough money coming in to pay the massive property tax bills that they have for all their properties. They have some reserves to pay that, but I don't think they have the cash flow to pay it.
Okay. So I have a question. Clearwater, Florida, that seems to be the headquarters, basically, of Scientology.
It's where the biggest church of Scientology is, but it's not the headquarters.
Where's the headquarters?
It depends on what you mean by that. So international management headquarters is in California. Middle management is in California. There's a bunch of different Scientology continents, and there's a continental management unit in every Scientology continent. But you're probably generally familiar with Scientology's bridge to total freedom, or at least that there is one. There's like this big bridge, right? Mm-hmm. This chart. You will hear the organization here in Clearwater referred to as the spiritual headquarters. That's just a bullshit term. All that means is that here in Clearwater, Florida, is the only place where OT7 is delivered.
Okay.
But even that doesn't make it the spiritual headquarters, because the ship, Scientology's cruise ship, the Free Winds, is the only place in the world that OT8 is delivered. So why don't they call the Free Winds the spiritual headquarters? That's what I'm saying. It's just a word they pulled out of their butts to use because it sounds catchy.
Okay. I was just, I know in the past, like, they tried to, like, take over Clearwater, Florida, or, like, all of the government, sort of, in Clearwater.
There's never been a Scientologist in a position of government in Clearwater, believe it or not. But Clearwater does have a reputation for being run by Scientology.
Yeah, I heard, like, Clearwater has, like, one of the largest populations of Scientology people.
Los Angeles would have the most Scientologists living in it. LA County. There's about 120,000 people in Clearwater. There's maybe 3,500 Scientologists.
Really? So I thought it was significantly higher. There's not a lot of people.
Scientology wants you to think it's significantly higher.
Okay. I was going to ask a question. I don't know if this is relevant now, but there's a person we like to talk about a lot on my channel called Meet Kevin. He's a big YouTuber, and he was actually arrested coming out of Clearwater, Florida. He hired lawyers from Clearwater, so I was just curious if you knew anything, if he was possibly a Scientologist.
Oh, there's no way that he is. But let me ask you this. Why was he in Clearwater, of all places?
There's another YouTuber called Ben Mala, who's a big real estate guy.
I know of Ben Mala.
So he went there to visit him and do some videos with him.
Really?
Yeah, and then there was also there was a thing called the Creator Clash where a bunch of YouTubers were having a boxing match. That was in Tampa, so he was going from Clearwater to Tampa to go to that.
I had no idea. Did the Juke Squad crew go over to that?
I'm not familiar with the Juke Squad.
Oh, you should look them up. They're also Clearwater folks.
Okay. So I had some question about some people who I didn't initially know were Scientologists, but I found out later Dr. Eric Berg, he's a big YouTuber, and Grant Cardone. And it seems like both of these guys hide the fact that they're Scientologists. So I'm just curious why that is.
Grant doesn't hide it. Grant promotes Scientology.
Really? I've never seen him talk about it on his channel at all.
Oh, you know what? Have you looked at the videos on my channel about Grant Cardone?
I have. I've seen some of them, yeah.
Oh, well, in many of them, I highlight what he has said about Scientology. Well, to be fair, I've got a bunch of Grant Cardone videos, but one in particular, I discuss an interview that he did with Vlad TV.
Okay.
And it was all about Scientology. So Grant does promote Scientology.
All right.
And Eric Berg doesn't, probably because he also passes himself off as a doctor when he's a chiropractor. Mm-hmm. And now technically there's nothing wrong with calling yourself a doctor if you're a chiropractor, but the fact is most of his viewers don't actually realize he's not a medical doctor. So he's already kind of being really cute about passing himself off as a doctor. Mm-hmm. I think it would... I think the reason Eric Berg is not open about it is because it would hurt him reputationally. Scientology has a terrible reputation. They also have a reputation for being pretty anti-medicine, which is a reputation that I think is a bit exaggerated. Scientologists aren't literally anti-medicine, but there is an anti-medicine bias that exists. That would be kind of inappropriate for someone in the medical field. Yeah. But Dr. Eric Berg's son, Ian, has left Scientology recently and has spoken out a lot about his dad. But in fact, his dad even got wrapped up in a lawsuit from a former employee who sued because Scientology was being forced on the staff. They're being forced to do Scientology courses and stuff. So Eric does play it close to the vest, but Grant, not so much.
Okay, I'm just curious, does the church disapprove of that Eric Berg hides that fact? Because I feel like in Christianity, you wouldn't want to hide the fact that you're a Christian. It's kind of against what the religion is about. So it just seems kind of odd to me.
But I'm sure there's exceptions to that though too, right? Well, it's funny because if I try to think of high profile people, the only ones I can think of are the ones who do talk about their faith. Scientology does not particularly care if someone in a professional field is promoting that they're in Scientology. All they really care about is whether you're giving them money. And there's some policies in Scientology that make it clear that all that's really expected of you is to sort of be almost be such a good example in your field or whatever that when people find out you're a Scientologist, they're like, oh, wow. That's amazing. I must find out more about that. You're not necessarily pressured to be out there blabbing about it. A la Tom Cruise 2005-ish. You notice Tom Cruise doesn't say anything about it either anymore.
Okay. So I had a question. I've seen specifically on Dr. Berg's channel, he said several times the phrase God bless. And to me, it just seems like that's something that I don't know if he's referring to Xenu or if he's just trying to get people to think he's a Christian or what's going on with that.
That's exactly what it is.
That's what it is?
He's just trying to give people the impression that he's Christian without actually saying that. That's 100% what it is. Grant does that sometimes at the end of his videos too. God bless.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's bullshit, because Scientologists would never in a million years say that to each other. Not even casually, not socially, not flippantly. Literally, they would only say it if it was actually a joke. Like, Scientologists do not believe in God at all. So yeah, no, that's him being fraudulent.
Okay. So can you go over, you just said Scientologists don't believe in a God, but can you go over who Xenu is? All-powerful
So
Xenu?
Xenu, yeah, a lot of people think Xenu is Scientology's God, or that Xenu is the creation story of Scientology. The Xenu story is L. Ron Hubbard's story for why Earth is so screwed up, and why people on Earth are so screwed up, and how we came to be here on this Earth as spiritual beings. It's got nothing to do with it's not like a creation story. Do you know what I mean? Like, Scientologists do believe in evolution. Okay, and the general idea is Scientologists believe that there's life just littered everywhere in the universe. Like, think Star Wars. You go to Star Wars, every planet's got some life form on it, right? So you could ask yourself in Star Wars, who were the aliens? Like, is Han Solo an alien? Well, to Chewbacca he would be, right?
Yeah.
So Scientology, they go like, oh, they believe in aliens. Scientologists wouldn't even use the word aliens, because you don't use the word aliens in Star Wars, right? Because who's the alien? You get what I'm saying?
I understand, yeah.
So Scientologists literally believe life is everywhere. That intelligent life is everywhere. And yet, how did we come to be trapped on this planet? And that the answer to that question has to do with Xenu. So Xenu he was essentially a politician. I don't know where the word overlord came from. Maybe Hubbard said that somewhere, but people hear overlord and they think Lord, they think God. He was a politician in L. Ron Hubbard's story. Okay? And he was the ruler of some galactic confederacy of like 86 planets or whatever the hell it was. And he was trying to solve an overpopulation problem.
Okay.
This is a very well thought out story.
So he's Thanos, basically.
Yes, he's Thanos. He was trying to solve an overpopulation problem, and so he did it the way everyone would do it: is you call a bunch of people in for a fake tax audits.
Okay.
And when they come in, you go, psych, and you freeze them in a bunch of glycol, and you load them up on a bunch of space planes, and for some reason, you fly them to Earth.
Okay.
And you drop them in volcanoes and blow them up in hydrogen bombs. I don't know. Like, if you were going to blow them up in hydrogen bombs, why were the volcanoes necessary, or vice versa?
Okay.
Okay. And so then, but remember, these are spiritual beings. But see, this is where it's not clear, right? Like, did he freeze all these bodies, or did he somehow figure out how to freeze a spiritual being? That's not quite clear. Anyhow, the combination of the hydrogen bombs, or the atom bombs, and the volcanoes basically screwed these beings up so much that they're insane. These beings have gone insane. Insane, unconscious, sick. They don't know where they are. They don't know who they are. They don't know what they are. And they've been floating around in the winds of Earth for billions of years.
So are the spiritual beings, are those like us in the past, or are
Yes.
they different? Okay.
So those, they're not us. That's actually what gets interesting. Okay. So you'll see what I'm saying here. So those are the insane Thetans. Those Thetans, did I already use the word Thetan, or did I just switch to Thetan? Thetan is Scientology's word for spiritual being.
Okay.
Okay. Those spiritual beings are so screwed up, they can't even occupy and animate a body. So us, you and I, we came to Earth later on somehow. LRH was never quite clear about that. But we came to Earth later on. That's why we're of greater ability and intelligence and awareness, and we're up to the level of being able to occupy a body. And so in Scientology, for 80% of, if you're going up Scientology's bridge, well over half of the bridge, you have no idea about Xenu. These Thetans that got blown up in the volcanoes, by the way, they're called body Thetans, whereas you and I are just Thetans. Those are called body Thetans because on Scientology's confidential level of OT3, L. Ron Hubbard reveals that you have tens or hundreds of thousands of those sick, crazy, mostly unconscious beings stuck to your body and even stuck to you as a thetan. And those beings are basically the voice in your head. I mean, I don't have voices in my head, but for people who hear voices, it's your body thetans. If you have pains and somatics and chronic illnesses, it's your body thetans. If you have insecurities and doubts and whatever, it's your body thetans. Okay. If you're manic depressive, this is one of the reasons someone like Tom Cruise is against any and all medication. He goes, it's just masking the problem. And you go, okay, but what's the real problem? He would say, body thetans. And so that's the Xenu story. It's just, and it's almost like as a Scientologist does these OT levels, it's almost irrelevant whether you believe in Xenu or don't believe in Xenu or whether his name's Bob or Steve or Joe. Mm-hmm. Like Xenu, it just happens to be the figure in the story where Hubbard is giving his explanation for why mankind and Earth is so screwed up. There's no prayer here. There's no, there's nothing. There's no any traditional ideas. Any traditional religions. When you have some figure like that, he plays some role. Or Xenu's just a guy in a story, and the story is why Earth is so messed up, why humankind is so messed up, and when you're doing your confidential OT levels, all you're doing is telepathically counseling these crazy spirits that are stuck to you to wake them up, sort of snap them out of it, and then they go, oh, look, I'm a thetan. Oh, I remember where I am and who I am. And then you tell them to go get a body. And then they grow up to be a sane, rational individual who will most likely get into Scientology.
Okay.
I mean, so literally, if you've seen the South Park episode, and they go, this is what Scientologists actually believe. Mm. It is. That was an extremely accurate portrayal of what Scientologists believe.
Okay, so basically from the story you told me, it seems like Xenu is kind of a bad guy. But do they see him as a bad guy, or he's just, not good or bad? He's just an individual?
He's bad. What he did was bad.
So is he like, he's not considered like the devil? He's not like the devil of Scientology?
I mean, if you had to draw the analogy, perhaps, but it's such a loaded analogy, though.
Okay.
The devil's a fallen angel and all that stuff, and Scientologists don't believe in anything spiritual other than thetans. There's no like levels of thetans. There's no angel thetans or supreme being thetans. We're all the same. We are literally all the same. And Xenu's just a dude. He's just a politician. He's like Pol Pot or Mao or whatever, a bad politician behaving badly.
Okay. So one question, I've seen several of your videos, and you have claimed that, Scientology has claimed that they have millions of followers, and I know on your channel you've claimed that they only have like a few 100,000, and I'm just curious, do you have like any proof that they don't have millions of followers?
Oh, sure. It's actually closer to 30,000. There have never been hundreds of thousands of Scientologists. At the peak, it was 100,000.
Really? Close
to 100,000 in the early 90s. So, very late 80s, early 90s.
Do you have evidence of that?
Well, the evidence I lay it out in my video. There's a video on my channel that I've been meaning to redo because I did the video back before I ever even used graphics or editing software. The name of my video is something like Proof of Less Than 35,000 Scientologists.
Okay. So I haven't seen that video.
I'll give you
okay.
Oh, you're going to love it. But I'll give you a few data points. So anyone who's ever worked in a Scientology organization knows how many staff and how many public that org had. There's only about 150 orgs in the world. And there is not any org in the world usually does not have more than 50 to 75 staff members, and they would be absolutely thrilled to have 150 public. There's about 5,000 Sea Org members in the world. Maybe at the most there was 6,000. Another data point is that any Scientologist in any major city knows every other Scientologist in that city. I mean, even that is a funny thing to consider.
So like in Hollywood, all the Scientologist actors, they all know who everyone else is?
everyone at the Celebrity Center is going to know someone if they've been there that long enough. They're going to know each other.
Okay.
There's maybe in all of LA County, again, LA County has the most Scientologists. In all of LA County, you might be able to put together like 8 or 10 different Scientology organizations, depending on how you count them. Every Scientologist in one of those organizations is going to know every other Scientologist who takes a course or gets auditing at that organization. I'll give you another example. So my mom got into Scientology in Philadelphia, and I spent most of my time in Scientology working at the Philadelphia org downtown. The Philadelphia org is the only Scientology organization in all of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. In all of Pennsylvania. There's not even one in Pittsburgh. And even though it's the only Scientology organization in 3 states, there was never more than 50 staff members and 150, maximum 200 public. Now you take that and you multiply it by 150, and you're at least in the ballpark of how many Scientologists there are. And there's a few different ways to back into this number. But even if you're being extremely generous, and in my video, I err on the side of being very generous, it's impossible to come up with more than 35,000 Scientologists in the world.
Okay. It just seems like if you were to get involved with this organization, specifically like the one you said in Pittsburgh, and you just realized that you only ever saw the same 150 people, you'd be like, what's going on? You know, this is a really good religion or whatever it is. Why isn't there hundreds of thousands of people that I'm running into that are also involved in it?
You would think so. Being in a cult is a funny thing.
Okay.
Because no one thinks they're in a cult.
Yeah.
But you have the most obvious questions that you think would sort of be like game-changing questions depending on the answer, and it's like, people figure out how to brush off questions like that. One of the ways people brush off those questions is it's very easy to assume that everything is going great everywhere else, that there's something wrong with you guys and what you're doing. You know, I know that a lot of the time I was in Scientology, I was under the impression that Mexico was just exploding. South America was just blowing up. Russia, you know. So,
yeah, I've seen that there's a video on their channel that I've seen where they've opened like these really massive buildings all over the world in Africa and Mexico and stuff like that. So are those just like, they open them up and then there's like 10 people there, basically?
Yes. Yeah, so in preparation of the grand opening, they actually bring in public and staff from other organizations. And then after the grand opening, everybody trickles away. Those buildings are mostly empty. So even an organization that should be massive, like the one right off of Central Park in New York City, okay? We're talking Manhattan. That organization has so few members and makes such a little amount of money, they can't afford to pay their electric bill. They tell the staff members not to take the elevator, take the stairs. It runs up the electric bill. And New York City is one of the biggest goddamn cities in the country or in the world. And, you know, and there's 2 organizations in all of the New York City area, and one of them was put there just as a token organization. Like Scientology went down. Isaac Hayes was complaining that there weren't enough black Scientologists. So Miscavige was like, we're opening up an org in Harlem, and we're opening up an org in, what's the city most known in LA? But Harlem's
Compton?
New York, right? Yeah, but it wasn't Compton. Basically, they put an org that was intended to be a black org in New York and a black org in LA, which sounds completely racist, but, you know.
Okay.
My point being that there's only one organization in New York City that was created organically, and just one. And that org can't even make enough money to pay its electric bill. The evidence to Scientologists that Scientology is small is right in front of their eyes. It's just impossible to connect those dots when you're just in the cult thing.
All right. Well, that leads into my next question. So if they don't have that many followers, and you said the organization in New York can't keep their lights on, it seems to me that they have a ton of money. So I'm just curious, how do they have so much money? Where's all the money coming from if they have so few followers?
So there's 3 main ways that Scientology makes money. And the reason an organization like New York Org has such little money is because that org can only make money by selling Scientology courses and auditing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not where Scientology makes most of its money. So there's an organization called the International Association of Scientologists, or the IAS. This is like the membership organization for Scientology. This is donations straight to the IAS is how Scientology makes most of its money.
And those come from members mostly?
Those come from members, and you get statuses. So like if you ever see a picture of somebody getting like a trophy for having donated $10 million, that's donations made to the IAS. So a Scientologist in New York that donates to the IAS, the New York org ain't getting that money. That's going right into the IAS accounts. There's a third way that Scientology makes almost as much money as it makes through the IAS, and that is through this real estate program that has been running since about 2004. You mentioned all the big buildings that you see they're opening up. In 2004, David Miscavige said, you know what? I figured out why Scientology isn't reaching its full potential. Our buildings are crap. Never mind the fact that L. Ron Hubbard was doing just fine growing Scientology when he was still running things. So Miscavige is like, and also this is how Miscavige gets away with not releasing OT 9 and 10. He goes, before we can release OT 9 and 10, all orgs in the world need to purchase a new building, no less than 50,000 square feet, and they need to renovate it. And that needs to be funded with new donations from the local Scientologists, meaning we're not dipping into the reserves. And management isn't going to, we're not taking money out of reserves to pay for these buildings. It has to be funded through new donations. So currently, Scientologists are being squeezed to death for donations for these buildings. The strategy's been running for almost 20 years now. They're not even a quarter of the way done. Mm-hmm. So, so do the math on that. So could Miscavige pull this con off for another 30 years before he dies? If he keeps going on this real estate strategy and convincing Scientologists that, God, you're just not ponying up enough cash. We have to get these buildings opened. This is holding Scientology expansion back. So
wasn't there a
they
famous...
do make a ton of money. Even as their membership has shrunk, their money in the bank has gone up, which is only possible through the tax exemption, obviously. They don't pay property taxes and they don't pay income tax, and they don't pay their staff hardly anything. So to a degree, the biggest expenses they have is water and electricity. That's how they're able to accumulate so much money.
Don't they have a famous building in Clearwater called the Flag Building where you have the Superpower Rundown? Is that a thing? What is the Superpower Rundown?
It's the only reason it sounds interesting at all is because they decided to call it the Superpower Rundown.
Okay.
If they called it something else, it would just be the dumbest. It wouldn't even be noteworthy. Like, remember, all Scientology auditing to one degree or another is supposed to raise your spiritual awareness. Mm-hmm. The Superpower Rundown is just it's just another auditing action that has an interesting name. Like, they don't literally think they get superpowers. They just think they become more spiritually aware.
All right. So I'm curious, how much money do you think Scientology currently has?
The best estimate is about $3 billion.
$3 billion? Wow. Okay. So
one thing... I don't know. Is that even a lot?
I don't know. For an organization with only like 30,000 people, it seems like quite a bit of money.
That's true.
So I've heard something mentioned where basically Scientology, for someone who leaves the church or says something really bad about the church, basically they have a principle called fair game where you can you can psychologically torture them basically if you say. So can you describe fair game to people who don't know what that is?
Fair game was a policy that L. Ron Hubbard created that basically was an instruction to Scientologists that once a person is declared to be a suppressive person or a suppressive group, and this was back in the day, Hubbard actually had an enemies list. Mm-hmm. His instruction to Scientologists was, you can do anything to these people without any punishment from the organization. He literally says, ruin them, destroy them, frame them. He doesn't say kill them. But it was basically like, you are allowed to do anything to destroy these people and you won't hear a word about it from us. And the fact that that was actually a written policy got Scientology into a lot of trouble. It came up in an investigation by the Australian government. it came up in some legal problems from the British government. So then later Hubbard came along and said the practice of labeling someone fair game is canceled, but all other policies on how to deal with suppressive people still apply. So the only thing that was canceled was actually putting this into writing. So there's no longer an issue. There's no paper hanging up in an office somewhere that says Aaron Smith-Levin is fair game. But you will see that aaronsmithlevin.com is a website created by Scientology.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
So that website, every single person who appeared in Leah Remini, Scientology in the Aftermath television program, every single person who appeared in that show got their own website.
Really?
And every person who got their website, the website went live the night their episode aired. Like these guys weren't even careful about masking what they were trying to do. So like my website went live the night my episode aired.
Wow. Yeah, so I was going to mention that, like, when I was doing research on you, when I Googled you, the very first thing that came up was aaronsmithlevin.com, which I assumed was your website, and I clicked on it, and obviously it's just a full page of basically mean things about you. They said that you were actually kicked out of Scientology. You didn't leave. You had massive anger issues. So none of that's true. They just made that up.
They say that about everyone. Like, literally everyone who leaves Scientology, they say, we kicked you out.
Really?
And you go, you didn't. Well, because, see, they make it so, like, that's technically true. So they declare you a suppressive person. That means you're expelled. But they don't declare you until after you've already left. Like if you say, I'm leaving, then they'll try to get you back, they'll try to get you back, they'll try to get you back. And then once they have determined it is useless, then they declare you. So then they go, oh, you were expelled. And then in the issue where they declare you, by the way, declare is short, they declare you a suppressive person. And it's literally an issue. It's on a piece of paper. It says, suppressive person declare, Aaron Smith-Levin. That's when they just put all the bullshit in there of everything. They'll just go through your whole ethics file of anything you've even been remotely accused of. And they basically just make this thing sound as horrible as possible. Okay. Now, the website is a whole other issue. The website, they just make up lies about people. Like, you're probably familiar maybe with Mike Rinder. He was a co-host of the Scientology in the Aftermath show. He just wrote a book, so he's been doing a lot of press. So, like, just look, if you search Mike Rinder, not only are you going to see the website, it's going to be a paid advertisement. Scientology's paying to serve up his hate website in all the Google searches, right? And then, but I use him as an example because it's so egregious and so over the top and so manufactured, the kind of stuff they've put on his website. It's just one of the best examples. So even on my YouTube channel, I did a video where I go through like each paragraph on the website and I go like, this is totally manufactured, or here's what they're referring to, but here's what really happened and here's what they're saying. They don't seem to realize how bad it makes them look. Yeah. That like everyone who's ever left and speaks out about abuses, they're all liars, they're all cheaters, they're all wife beaters, they're all thieves, they're all working for big pharma. I mean, it's practically satire. Okay.
So now that I'm doing this interview, am I going to get fair gamed? Are there going to be people following me around and stuff?
No, there's just too many people. There's just too many people. So the only people who get fair gamed are former Scientologists who speak to the press. And even then, I'm not sure they've been able to fair game everyone. Like if you look through my website, you'll see there's things on there that makes it very obvious they're having me followed. They call people I do business with. It's why I'm always very upfront with everyone about everything regarding Scientology. So like it gets to the point where people who I do business with, they're like excited if a Scientology PI starts sniffing around like, oh my God, it's really happening. And I'll be the first one they call. Like, you're not gonna believe it.
Okay. So approaching the end of the interview, but I'm just curious. I know that I think Scientologists, they're not actually allowed to talk about like your channel or people who are saying bad things about Scientology. Is that true?
What do you say it again?
People who are in Scientology, like Grant Cardone or something, they can't actually talk about you and talk about how you're saying bad things about Scientology, or is that not true?
Well, when you say they can't talk about it, so a Scientologist would not be allowed to watch my video. I think I know where you're going with this, but so a Scientologist, for one, would not be allowed to watch my videos unless they were specifically told to. But no, they would get, any Scientologist would get in a lot of trouble. You might be referring to the fact that that I said Grant Cardone specifically is not allowed to say my name in his videos. That's just because by doing so, he would be inadvertently promoting me and directing attention to me. It's not like there's not some policy that is like one must never utter the name of a former Scientologist. It's not like that.
Yeah.
Like in a private conversation, Grant could mention my name. But, in response to my videos, he can't say this asshole Aaron Smith-Levin is saying X, Y, and D. The moment he says my name, he would get in a lot of trouble because now he is forwarding what I'm saying to his millions of followers. That's a big no-no.
Okay. So with Grant Cardone, I know you said on his channel, is he still currently under investigation with his business related to making up like false sayings about how much money he's making from his buildings?
I don't think that's what he's being investigated for, but he is still currently being investigated by the FBI.
Okay. So I think that's about all the questions I had for you. Do you have anything you want to say at the end about anything?
No. I mean, the one thing I like to mention is that, I'm the vice president of the Aftermath Foundation, and we help people who are escaping from Scientology. And we've been incredibly effective in doing that. So if anybody would like to know more about that, the website is theaftermathfoundation.org.
Okay, so I'll have a link to your YouTube channel and your website below this video as well. So thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure.